The greatest lesson without a single word. Imagine this. You're seated in an ancient hall. The air is thick with stillness. Not just quiet, but a kind of profound silence that makes you feel every breath, every movement. Before you sits the Buddha, the world-honored one. His very presence radiates calm wisdom. It's said that just hearing a single teaching from him is enough to clear the fog of doubt from one's mind. You've heard of his boundless compassion and his profound wisdom, both of which have touched countless lives. But today feels different. Everyone sits in perfect stillness, waiting. Every heart, every mind is wide open, ready to receive his words of truth. But the Buddha says nothing. Without a word, without warning, he stands, slowly, purposefully. He doesn't explain. He doesn't gesture. All eyes are on him. Everyone glances at each other, their faces puzzled. What's happening? They wonder. With calm, deliberate movements, the Buddha drapes his robe over his shoulder, takes up his alms bowl, and begins to walk. Each step is slow. Each step is measured. He walks away from the hall, and no one says a word. He moves in silence, step by step. His pace is steady, like a gentle breeze moving across the surface of a still pond. Every eye follows him, every breath is held. Whispers break the quiet. "What is he doing?" someone mutters. But no one dares speak aloud. The Buddha continues walking. He leaves the hall, his form growing smaller as he walks toward the city in the distance. Still, he says nothing. The disciples, the monks, and the followers watch him go, their faces a blend of confusion and curiosity. What's going on? What does this mean? They don't know it yet, but the greatest lesson of their lives is happening right before their eyes. Actions speak louder than words, the lesson of silent footsteps. When the Buddha walked into the city that day, no one knew what he would do. The sun was warm but gentle, and the earth beneath his feet carried just a hint of that warmth. Each step he took was steady, deliberate, not too fast, not too slow. His bare feet touched the ground with quiet grace. Step, lift, place, step, lift, place. Over and over the pattern repeated. Calm, rhythmic, grounded. From a distance, the townspeople noticed him. Some recognized him immediately. "It's the Buddha," they whispered to one another. People paused in their daily routines. Some stopped sweeping their porches. Others put down the tools in their hands. Curious eyes followed his every move. No one asked him any questions. No one needed to. They all knew. He was on his alms walk. Without a single word, his purpose was clear. No explanations, no announcements, just action. Now, imagine this. Imagine you were one of those townspeople that day. You're outside, maybe sweeping your front porch. The air smells faintly of warm earth and fresh leaves. Inside, your family is getting ready for lunch. The clatter of dishes echoes faintly in the background. And then, out of the corner of your eye, you see him. A monk. A simple monk, standing quietly at the front of your home. No words, no request. He holds a small alms bowl in his hands. His eyes are downcast, his face calm and unshaken. He says nothing. He asks for nothing. He just stands there. Now ask yourself, what would you do? Would you offer him food? Would you feel compelled to give him something, anything at all? If you were wealthy, perhaps you'd give him some leftovers, something you no longer need. If you were poor, you might hesitate, unsure if you can spare even a single grain of rice. But here's the thing, he doesn't judge you. The Buddha makes no distinction between rich or poor. He does not measure the amount of food given. It doesn't matter if it's a spoonful of rice or an entire meal. His presence is the same, still, calm, unshaken. He simply stands there, waiting. No pressure, no urgency, no complaints. At that moment, you begin to feel something stir inside you. At first, you may have thought that you were the giver and he was the receiver. But slowly, something shifts. Who is really giving and who is really receiving? You see, the person standing in front of the Buddha, the one holding food, deciding whether to give or withhold, that person is being given a far greater gift. The chance to act with compassion, the chance to practice generosity, the chance to confront their own heart. Mindfulness. When you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. After collecting enough food, the Buddha returned to the hall. By this time, everyone had already gathered. Disciples, monks, and followers sat in neat rows, eyes fixed on him. Their attention was sharp. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Some of them thought to themselves, finally, he's going to teach. But he didn't. The Buddha sat down, slowly, quietly. He opened his alms bowl. He reached inside and pulled out the food he had collected from the townspeople. And then he began to eat. No words, no lecture, no teachings, no. He just ate, bite by bite, slowly, deliberately. Can you picture it? He didn't talk to anyone. He didn't glance around the room. He didn't rush. He picked up a small piece of food, slowly raised it to his mouth, and with complete focus, he chewed. Each chew slow, each chew deliberate, every movement precise. He tasted every flavor, felt every texture, and experienced every moment. No hurry, no distractions, no thoughts of what comes next. Meanwhile, everyone else in the room sat in silence, watching him. The sound of quiet chewing filled the space. At first, confusion spread among them. Why isn't he teaching? What is this? But slowly, something changed. The message wasn't in his words, it was in his actions. They watched him chew, they watched him breathe, they watched him simply eat. And then, one by one, it clicked. They understood. When you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. It sounds simple, but think about it. How often do we do this? These days, most of us don't just eat. We eat while scrolling on our phones. We eat while watching TV. We eat while thinking about work, deadlines, and to-do lists. Our eyes are on the screen. Our hands are on the spoon. Our minds are somewhere else. We eat, but we're not really eating. Meanwhile, the Buddha sat in silence, fully present with his food. No phone, no distractions, no racing thoughts. His mind and body moved as one. He wasn't multitasking. He wasn't thinking ahead. He wasn't catching up on messages. He was just eating. What would it feel like for you to eat like that? What would it feel like to sit down, put away your phone, and give your full attention to every bite? No rush, no worry, just food. That's the lesson. When you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. It's simple, but sometimes the simplest lessons are the hardest to master. the Buddha's unconventional teaching method, silence as a lesson. When the Buddha finished his meal, he didn't say a word. No announcement, no conclusion, no call for attention. He quietly picked up his alms bowl and washed it with care. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and precise. Next, he folded his monk's robe, carefully, mindfully. Every fold was clean, crisp, and intentional. Then, without a single glance at the crowd, he sat down. He crossed his legs, placed his hands on his lap, and he began to meditate. No words, no instructions, no explanation. The hall fell into silence. Everyone watched him with wide eyes, stunned. Wait, is that it? Someone thought. Isn't he going to teach us something? Whispered another. Confusion spread through the crowd like ripples in water. They had been waiting for a grand sermon. They had been expecting a profound teaching filled with wisdom, parables, and explanations. But all they got was silence. No one dared to ask. No one dared to speak. Everyone sat there in quiet disbelief. Then, out of the stillness, a single figure rose. It was Subhuti, one of the Buddha's closest disciples. He stood slowly, stepped forward, and knelt down. With his hands pressed together in a gesture of deep respect, he bowed low before the Buddha. His voice broke the silence, but his tone was filled with awe and reverence. How extraordinary, how wondrous, beyond imagination. The world-honored one has taught us today with perfect skill. He has delivered the Dharma to us in the most profound way. The crowd froze. Eyes darted from Subhuti to the Buddha, and then back to Subhuti. What did he mean? They wondered. But then something shifted. One by one, realization began to dawn on them. They had been waiting for words. They had been waiting for explanations. They had been waiting for something to hear. But the lesson was never in the words. The lesson was in the silence. Think about that for a moment. How often do we wait for someone to tell us what to do? How often do we think wisdom must be delivered through lectures, books, or instructions? But sometimes the greatest lessons come in silence. Silence teaches you to notice. Silence teaches you to listen, not to others, but to yourself. Silence allows you to see what's been right in front of you all along. The Buddha didn't explain the lesson, he demonstrated it. The giver and the receiver. Who is truly giving? When you see a beggar standing at your front door, what's the first thought that crosses your mind? Maybe it's something like this: this person needs help. And if you decide to offer them a little food or spare change, you might feel that you are the one giving, that you've done something good, something generous. But in the story of the Buddha, everything is turned upside down. Think back to the image of the Buddha walking through the city on his alms round. At first glance, it seems obvious. He's the one receiving. After all, he's walking barefoot, carrying a simple alms bowl, waiting silently in front of each house. The people inside offer him food. But here's the twist. The one who gives is actually the one who receives. Imagine this scene. You're at home sweeping your front porch. The late morning sun casts soft, golden light across the ground. Inside, the sound of your family preparing lunch echoes faintly. It's an ordinary day. Then you notice something. There's a monk standing outside your gate. He's barefoot, his simple robes drape loosely over his shoulders. In his hands, he holds an alms bowl. His eyes are soft, his gaze lowered. His face is calm, serene. He says nothing, he asks for nothing. He just stands there. What would you do? Do you give him food? Do you turn away? Do you pretend not to see him? If you were wealthy, perhaps you'd feel inclined to offer him some leftovers. Something small, something easy. If you were poor, perhaps you'd hesitate, feeling unsure if you could spare anything at all. But here's the thing. The Buddha doesn't ask for anything. He doesn't judge who gives or how much they give. He doesn't care if it's a bowl of rice or a single piece of fruit. He just stands there, waiting. No rush, no demands, no expectations. And that's when something happens. At first, you may feel like you are the one giving, but slowly something shifts inside you. There's a small but undeniable feeling stirring in your heart. You feel a quiet sense of peace, a warmth, a recognition. Suddenly, you realize that this moment is not about him. It's about you. Who is really giving and who is really receiving? You thought you were offering food to a monk. But in truth, you were being given an opportunity, a chance to practice compassion, generosity, and kindness. The gift wasn't the rice, the bread, or the fruit. The true gift was the chance to confront your own heart. Think about it. Every time you offer kindness to another person, your time, your money, your patience, your empathy, who is really receiving the gift? Sometimes it's you. The person you help may forget you by the next day, but the feeling of having helped someone, that stays with you. That peace, that joy, that quiet sense of fulfillment. Sometimes the greatest gift you'll ever receive is the chance to give. The alms bowl, a symbol of acceptance. The Buddha's alms bowl may seem simple at first glance. Just a plain, unadorned bowl, but its meaning runs deep. This bowl has one purpose and one purpose only: to hold just enough food for one meal. Pay attention to that word, enough. The alms bowl is never overflowing. It is never too large. It is never too small. Its size is deliberate. Its design is intentional. It represents enough, not excess, not scarcity, just enough. But here's a question for you. In today's world, does enough ever feel like enough? Think about it. We chase more money, more possessions, more success, more recognition, more. We are constantly chasing the next thing, believing it will finally make us feel complete. But take a moment to reflect on the Buddha's bowl. His bowl isn't about less, it's about just right. Enough doesn't mean barely getting by. It means having exactly what you need. No more, no less. When the bowl is full, the Buddha stops. He doesn't ask for more. He doesn't collect extra just in case. Even if that day's offering is simple, just plain rice and wild greens, he accepts it fully. No complaints, no comparisons, no conditions. He eats what is given, and that is enough. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, when will I feel like I have enough? How many things in my life do I keep chasing even though I already have enough? We've been taught to believe that more is better. More money, more achievements, more possessions. But at what point does more stop adding to our happiness and start adding to our anxiety? The Buddha's bowl reminds us of something we've forgotten. Acceptance. Not giving up, not settling for less, but accepting life as it is. No comparisons, no chasing, no endless striving. When you can live like this, peace will find you. Because when you stop chasing more, you discover you already have enough. The wordless teaching, the lesson of a silent teacher. When you think about education today, what comes to mind? Teachers standing at the front of the classroom? Lectures filled with facts and explanations? Textbooks, assignments, and endless tests? That's what we've been taught to expect. But the Buddha's way of teaching was entirely different. He didn't stand at a podium. He didn't give long speeches filled with elegant words. Instead, he taught through action. On that day, the monks gathered, expecting to hear a profound sermon from the Buddha. They sat quietly, eyes fixed on him, ready to absorb every word. But instead of speaking, he stood up. He put on his robe. He picked up his alms bowl. And he walked. They watched as he went on his alms round, collected his food, returned to the hall, and ate in silence. When he finished eating, he washed his bowl, folded his robe, and sat in meditation. Not a single word was spoken, but that was the lesson. And it may have been the most profound lesson of all. Have you ever realized that the greatest lessons in your life didn't come from words? Think about it. The first time you failed and had to find the strength to get back up? The first time you lost something precious and learned to let go? The first time you sat in complete silence and noticed just how restless your mind really is? No one taught you these things, but you learned them. Because some lessons can't be taught in words. This is the Buddha's way. Silence, but a silence that echoes forever. The philosophy of when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep. These days we often eat without eating and sleep without sleeping. Think about it. We sit down to eat, but our eyes are glued to our phones. Our minds aren't with the meal in front of us. They're at work, replaying deadlines, unfinished tasks, and tomorrow's worries. At night we lie in bed, but instead of resting, we toss and turn, thinking about the future, replaying old conversations, and scrolling endlessly through our screens. We eat, but we're not really eating. We sleep, but we're not really sleeping. But the Buddha? He taught us something profoundly simple. When you're hungry, eat. When you're tired, rest. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But simple doesn't mean easy. This wisdom isn't new. Even in Vietnamese Zen poetry, the 13th century Zen master Tran Nhan Tong echoed this very teaching. Chew out. When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep. Stop searching for treasures outside yourself. Everything you need is already within you. So simple. But how often do we actually live this way? How often do we stop searching for more and realize that everything we need is already here? So how do we apply this in our modern lives? Here's how. When you eat, just eat. No phone, no TV, just you and the food in front of you. When you're tired, rest. Don't fight it. Put your work aside and give your body what it needs. When you work, just work. No distractions, no multitasking, just focus one task at a time. It sounds simple. It is simple. But sometimes it's the simplest lessons that are the hardest to live by. Here's a small challenge for you. The next time you sit down for a meal, put your phone away. Just once. Don't scroll. Don't rush. Just taste every bite. Feel every texture. Let every flavor be fully present. Try it when you walk, too. Don't check your phone. Don't rush to your destination. Just feel each step. This was the Buddha's lesson. It wasn't grand, it wasn't complicated, but it was powerful. When you're hungry, eat. When you're tired, sleep. Simple, but if you can master it, you may just discover that peace has been with you all along. The greatest lesson needs no word. Our world today is louder than it has ever been. Notifications, news alerts, phone calls, endless messages. They pull us away from the present moment, over and over again. But what if just for today you stopped? What if today you took a moment to learn from the Buddha's greatest lesson? Here's what you might discover. You don't need words to teach the most profound lessons. You don't need to have more. Sometimes enough is enough. You don't need to compete or chase after others. Peace is found in the present moment. When you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. When you're tired, rest. That's it. No philosophy book required. No grand speech necessary. This is the lesson the Buddha taught, and he taught it without speaking a single word. So the next time you feel exhausted from work or anxious because you're chasing more, stop. Close your eyes. Take a breath. And remember the image of the Buddha walking slowly down a simple dirt path, his alms bowl cradled in his hands. No rush, no stress, no need to prove anything to anyone. Step by step, mindful, free, at peace. You don't need to do more. You don't need to be more. You just need to be enough.